She boarded the plane in silence, just another black woman in a tailored coat. But when she arrived at seat 2A, a white man already sat there, legs crossed, eyes dismissive. "You must be lost," he said with a smirk. "This isn't the cleaning crew." The cabin froze. Evelyn calmly showed her first-class ticket. He scoffed, refusing to move. Passengers exchanged uneasy glances, unsure what to believe. But in just 3 minutes, Evelyn made one quiet phone call. And within seconds, the jet engine shut down, the flight reversed course, and the system prepared to learn who she really was. Evelyn Ford moved through the jet bridge with the unhurried pace of someone who had nothing to prove and everything to protect. Dressed in a charcoal gray blazer, her steps were measured, graceful, silent. Her eyes scanned the first-class cabin not for spectacle, but for sanctuary. She had taken this flight dozens of times on her route to San Francisco, routine investor meetings, global panels, leadership summits. Seat 2A was always hers, booked well in advance. She liked the left window seat, quiet, away from foot traffic, and just close enough to the galley for tea refills without disturbance. But this time, as she approached, her chest tightened. There, lounging in seat 2A like it had been his birthright, was a middle-aged white man in an aggressively tailored navy suit. One leg crossed over the other, his foot bounced with entitled rhythm. He glanced at Evelyn, gave a once-over without lifting his chin, and looked back at his phone. She cleared her throat softly. "Excuse me," she said, voice even. "I believe you're in my seat." He didn't look up. "Doubt it. I'm in 2A." Now he raised his head, slowly, theatrically, with the performative disbelief of someone well-versed in condescension. 2A, he repeated, like the concept was foreign. "That's this one, right?" He tapped the seat's armrest twice, mocking. "You sure you didn't mean 12A? Or maybe 22C?" Several nearby passengers turned subtly, curious. The cabin had that compressed, hushed tension where every word sounded louder than intended. Evelyn didn't flinch. She simply extended her boarding pass. He took it without touching it, just glancing at it as though she'd handed him a crumpled gum wrapper. "Ford, Evelyn. 2A, he read aloud, then let out a low, disbelieving whistle. "Huh. Well, this is awkward." She nodded once. "Indeed." But instead of standing, he leaned back and muttered, "Probably a system glitch. I've flown this route 100 times. I always get 2A." "That may be the case," Evelyn said, her tone still measured. "But this time, I have it." Now came the smirk. "Look," he said, gesturing toward the flight attendant, who had just begun helping another passenger 2 rows up. "Why don't we have her sorted out? I'm not moving until someone tells me officially. This is first class, sweetheart, not a charity draw." The word sweetheart sliced through the air with calculated disrespect. The nearby couple 2 seats over, an older man and woman, shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Another young man discreetly pulled out his phone, camera lens facing just beneath the tray table. Evelyn stood, still composed, still unmoved. "Of course," she replied coolly. "Let's ask her." The flight attendant, blonde, late 20s, with that well-practiced customer service smile, arrived moments later. "Is everything all right?" she asked. "I believe there's been a seating confusion," Evelyn said calmly. She handed over her boarding pass. The attendant reviewed it, then turned to the man. "Sir, her ticket confirms 2A." He didn't budge. "I'm a platinum flyer," he said. "I sit here every time. You can check your logs." "I understand, sir," she replied with increasing firmness. "But today, 2A is assigned to Ms. Ford. May I see your boarding pass, please?" He fished it out from his breast pocket with exaggerated reluctance. When he handed it over, she looked at it, then blinked. "Sir, you're assigned to 12C." He scoffed. "Must have been downgraded by accident. I booked first class weeks ago. I'm sorry, sir, but 2A is taken, and first class is fully booked today. You'll need to move to your assigned seat so we can begin boarding." His smile disappeared. "You expect me to give up my seat to—" He paused, eyes settling on Evelyn with just enough contempt. Someone like her? Gasps didn't echo, but they were felt. The unspoken weight of his words collapsed across the aisle. Evelyn didn't blink. She didn't retreat. Her voice, still calm, finally hardened. I earned this seat. I paid for it. You're in the wrong place. He laughed without humor. Lady, I don't care who you think you are. You can call the Pope. It won't matter. I'm not moving. The attendant stepped back. I'll speak with the purser, she said, retreating. The standoff settled into an eerie stillness. The man, the stranger, reached for his phone and began texting. Evelyn stood there, unmoved, her carry-on still beside her, one hand resting on the leather handle. But her other hand? It gently slipped into her blazer pocket and touched a device clipped to the lining. One tap, a silent signal. Elsewhere, at the gate, in a backroom screen, that signal triggered a notification marked Level 3 Protocol, EF. Back in the cabin, the flight attendant returned. Security will be joining us shortly, she said. Please remain seated. And then, just as Evelyn was about to place her bag in the overhead bin, the man in 2A leaned forward. You're not supposed to be here, he muttered. This seat, this cabin, it's not yours, no matter what your money says. She looked at him, only now truly looked at him, and in that gaze was everything. The decades she'd spent being underestimated, undermined, misnamed, underpaid, and overqualified. And then building her own damn empire because no one else would give her the space to breathe. She didn't respond. She didn't need to. Because 3 rows behind, someone murmured, just loud enough to be heard, That's Evelyn Ford, CEO of Nova Learn. The hush turned electric. The passenger with the camera under his tray table tapped record. And far below, on the tarmac, a black SUV with federal tags began rolling toward the jet bridge. As the SUV rolled to a halt beneath the jet bridge, Evelyn still stood silently beside seat 2A. Her carry-on remained untouched. Her posture hadn't shifted. But something in the cabin had changed. There was weight in the air, unspoken, pressing. The man in 2A, Richard Harlan, now leaned back with crossed arms, his jaw tight, pretending he wasn't suddenly uncomfortable. The flight attendant glanced between them, unsure if she should continue trying to de-escalate or just disappear. And then, through the narrow aisle, the purser stepped forward. An older woman, uniform sharp, eyes sharper. She approached Evelyn first, leaning in just slightly. Ms. Ford, she said, not asking, but acknowledging. Would you like a hot towel? The room blinked. Even Richard shifted. No, thank you, Evelyn said. But I would like to sit. The purser nodded once, pivoted to Richard. Sir, I need to ask you one final time to vacate this seat. We've received high priority confirmation. He blinked. High priority? Yes. This cabin is currently subject to internal protocol. Richard laughed, too loud. Internal protocol? For what? She's some kind of ambassador now? Sir, the purser repeated firmly. Please gather your belongings. He didn't move. Then came a soft voice from behind them. Excuse me. I think I can help. A woman stepped forward from seat 3B. A poised, silver-haired lady in an ivory silk scarf and navy suit. Late 60s, elegant, with the calm of someone accustomed to commanding rooms without raising her voice. I'm Elaine, she said, glancing at Evelyn. Ms. Ford and I, we've met. Evelyn turned. Her expression didn't flicker, but her gaze lingered a beat too long. Elaine continued, I'm happy to swap with him. Let him take 3B and I'll sit in 2A. Richard's eyebrows rose. Finally, someone reasonable, he said smugly. No, Evelyn said simply. Elaine blinked. Excuse me? I won't be moved from my seat. Not for his comfort. Not even by you. For the first time, Elaine's composure cracked. Just a fissure. She looked closer at Evelyn. And then the recognition sank in. You're not just Evelyn Ford, she said slowly. You're that Evelyn Ford. Nova Learn. AI for global education. You're correct. Elaine stepped back. I didn't realize. You did. Evelyn cut in softly. You just didn't recognize. Richard now sat rigid, staring at Evelyn like he was seeing her for the first time. Nova Learn? He muttered. That online thing? You're their face? I'm the founder. Whispers swept the cabin like wind over grass. Elaine's posture stiffened. Well, she said, voice cooler now. It's been a long time. Last I saw you, you were giving a TED Talk in Atlanta. My daughter applied for your scholarship program. Evelyn nodded slowly. And she wasn't accepted. Elaine's jaw tightened. She had perfect scores. You picked others, from disadvantaged backgrounds. Yes, that's the point. Elaine's eyes narrowed. I remember now. You said she lacked resilience. I said she'd never faced a system designed to crush her potential. The others had. It hung between them, years-old resentment masked as civility. Richard watched, perplexed. Wait, what is this? You two know each other? Elaine turned to him, but not with warmth. We sat on the same investment panel once. I underestimated her. So did half the room. We thought she was just another social impact story. A token. Evelyn's gaze hardened. You thought I was temporary, but I wasn't. The purser cleared her throat. Ms. Ford, security is now boarding at the rear. Shall I update them? Evelyn lifted one hand. Not yet. She turned to Richard. You have a decision, she said. You can leave with what little dignity you still hold, or stay and watch what happens when systems are tested. He sneered. Is that supposed to scare me? I'm not afraid of some startup darling with government connections. No, Evelyn said, picking up her carry-on. But you should be afraid of irrelevance. And with that, she placed her bag gently in the overhead, stepped aside, and allowed the approaching federal officer to speak. The officer, tall, composed, no nonsense, stopped before Richard. Sir, you've been identified as causing a boarding obstruction. I'll need you to return to your assigned seat. Richard began to protest, but the officer raised a hand. This is not a negotiation. Your boarding record shows 12C. We are moments away from escalating this to a removal. Choose wisely. At that, Richard stood abruptly, muttering curses under his breath. Unbelievable, he spat. Entitled doesn't even begin to describe. He stopped short as Evelyn sat in 2A, spine straight, eyes forward. He stared at her, as if trying to imprint her face for revenge. She didn't give him the satisfaction of looking back. He stormed toward the back of the plane. The cabin slowly resumed its rhythm, quiet, but changed. Evelyn opened her tablet and scrolled calmly through a proposal draft. Elaine, still in 3B, leaned forward just slightly. I suppose this isn't over, is it? Evelyn didn't look up. No, it's just begun. And far below, in the control tower, a red flag alert pinged across the screen. Match detected. Richard Harlan, subject of Surveillance Protocol Level 2. Conflict of interest. Next Path Inc. The flight resumed boarding. A hush lingered in first class like the last trace of smoke after a fire. Evelyn Ford sat in 2A now, legs crossed, eyes fixed on the rows ahead, tablet in hand. But she wasn't reading. Her fingers rested idle on the screen. Her mind was elsewhere, calculating, anticipating. Richard Harlan had slunk off to 12C, humiliated but unyielding. He stared at the back of her seat like a man robbed in daylight, burning with revenge he didn't yet know how to unleash. But as he sat down and buckled in with trembling fingers, he already had a plan forming. It started with a lie. Pulling out his phone beneath his coat, he opened a secure app reserved for corporate emergencies. Not airline emergencies, corporate. The kind you never discuss over dinner. He scrolled quickly to a stored contact labeled Ops Covert. The message he typed was short. Activate C3 on Ford. Priority, fraud, and ID trigger. He hit send. From the outside, he looked like any passenger annoyed about seating. But within seconds, that message reached a private security firm contracted by his employer, NextPath Inc. Their specialty: disinformation. 5 rows up, Evelyn finally exhaled and turned off her screen. She glanced toward the galley. A new attendant, a quiet young man with buzzed hair, offered her a glass of sparkling water. She thanked him but didn't sip. She noticed his glance linger a second too long, not flirtatious, but nervous, almost instructed. Her instincts twitched. Back in row 12, Richard's phone buzzed once. C3 activated. ETA 15 minutes. Target will be flagged. Richard slipped the device back into his blazer and smiled. If Evelyn Ford wanted a war, she'd get one, and he wouldn't even have to lift a finger. 15 minutes later, just as the captain announced final checks before taxiing, a chime rang through the cabin. The flight paused. All doors remained closed. The captain's voice returned, but this time, measured, tense. Ladies and gentlemen, we've received a report requiring immediate security verification. Please remain seated. This flight will return to the gate. Murmurs rippled through the cabin. Evelyn looked up sharply. The purser returned with the same officer from earlier, but this time, his gaze had changed. Formal, guarded. Ms. Ford, he said, voice tight. We've received a security alert concerning a potential identity fraud. I'm going to have to ask you to step off the aircraft for document verification. Gasps erupted. Someone in 3C whispered, "Is this about earlier?" Richard didn't hide his smirk this time. He watched as Evelyn stood, gracefully but with a subtle tension in her spine. "I see," she said. "Am I under arrest?" "No, ma'am. Just a verification protocol. We appreciate your cooperation." She nodded once. "I assume this protocol applies to all passengers under suspicion?" The officer blinked. "You're the only one flagged." Evelyn's lips pressed into a thin line. She turned slowly, aware of every eye watching her, judging, wondering. The woman who had just been declared a VIP was now being escorted off like a criminal. No sirens, no yelling, just soft-spoken destruction. As she walked down the aisle, one man, row 4, muttered loud enough for everyone to hear, "Told you, these people always fake it again." Evelyn didn't flinch, but her hands curled slightly at her sides. Outside the jet bridge, she was met not just by the officer, but by 2 men in black suits. No badges visible, but the air around them screamed government adjacent. "Ms. Ford, I'm Agent Halbrook. This is Agent Cantu, Homeland Security Cyber Division. We're here regarding potential inconsistencies in your digital ID and asset filings." "My digital what?" "Someone submitted an anonymous tip suggesting you boarded under falsified credentials, that your name, assets, and boarding status may be part of a broader fraud scheme tied to NovaLearn's recent funding rounds." Evelyn stared. "That's absurd." Agent Halbrook didn't blink. "We're obligated to investigate. We need you to come with us for formal questioning." Evelyn looked between them, then at the officer beside her. She was outnumbered, outleveraged, and, on paper, under suspicion. She lifted her wrist and tapped the discreet device hidden beneath her blazer sleeve. One silent signal. Not a panic button, not an alert. A request. Less than 30 seconds later, her phone buzzed. A message from Rachel Park, her legal counsel. "I know. Already moving. Don't say anything." Evelyn exhaled slowly. "Fine," she said to the agents. "I'll come." As they led her away from the gate, cameras turned. The story spread within minutes. CEO Evelyn Ford escorted from plane after ID flag. Back in the cabin, Richard refreshed his news feed. The headline was already trending. He smiled, and far above, on a satellite-linked server farm in Utah, a data injection was underway. Fabricated financial trails, backdated transactions, and digital evidence that Evelyn Ford had forged her NovaLearn equity stake. The system was being gamed against her, and the world would believe it unless she fought back. The federal building wasn't cold, but Evelyn Ford felt the chill in her bones. Inside the sleek glass interrogation room, all sterile metal edges and reinforced silence, she sat alone at a long table. Her hands were neatly folded, elbows off the surface, back straight. The room reminded her of boardrooms from 2 decades ago, back when no one believed her, when every investor call ended with, "We'll be in touch," and every pitch felt like screaming into wind. A voice crackled through the intercom. "Ms. Ford, someone will be with you shortly." She didn't respond. She wasn't waiting. She was remembering. Atlanta, 1998, 20 years old, just admitted to Harvard's Graduate School of Education, a rare slot, a scholarship for students of unique resilience. Evelyn had walked into her first seminar in a borrowed blazer and 2-day-old shoes. She spoke up, offered a sharp analysis on AI-driven curriculum bias. The room had gone quiet. And then came Professor Lewis Harlan. Yes, that Harlan, standing at the front, arms crossed, brow raised. "You sound very confident," he said. "Remind me, what's your academic background again?" "Community college, sir," she replied. He said, adjusting his tie. "Then perhaps let's stay in your lane until we finish with foundational theory." She had smiled then, that tight, polite smile, the kind black women wear to keep from burning the building down. The memory flickered. She closed her eyes. That man was Richard Harlan's father, and now his son was playing the same game, just with glossier tools and stronger allies. The door opened. Rachel Park entered like a wind of sharpness and authority. Blazer navy, lipstick matte, energy lethal. "They have nothing," she said without sitting. "They'll try anyway," Evelyn replied. Rachel laid out 2 documents. They fabricated a data trail suggesting you retroactively claimed 80% ownership of NovaLearn after its Series A. That would mean securities fraud, if true. "It's not," Evelyn said flatly. "I know, but they have packet logs, IP stamps. Some of them even lead back to your devices." Evelyn inhaled sharply. "How?" Rachel shrugged. "My guess? Inside job. Someone with privileged access. CFO is my first suspect." Evelyn shook her head. "He's been with us 7 years. Loyalty bends under pressure." Rachel slid a folder across the table. "Homeland Security is playing polite now. That'll change by tomorrow morning if we don't move fast. I've already requested a federal injunction to freeze the narrative. At least buy us a few hours." Evelyn scanned the documents. Her name, her company, her life, turned into a liability. And then, suddenly, the world dropped away again. She was 10 years old, New York City. Her mother had walked her into a bank to open her first savings account. The teller had smiled at her mom but didn't say a word to Evelyn, even when Evelyn asked the questions, even when she counted the money correctly. The teller smiled tighter and said, "She's smart. You must be so proud." Her mother had squeezed Evelyn's shoulder and said, "She's not just smart, she's ready." No one believed her then either. And yet, here she sat, decades later, still needing to prove she belonged. Rachel tapped the table. "Stay with me, Evelyn." "I'm here. I've flagged the metadata inconsistencies. I'll call in a friend at SEC to audit the altered filings. But you need to do something." "What?" "Break silence." Evelyn frowned. "No, not yet. They're painting you as the Black Elizabeth Holmes. If you let this spin, they want me emotional, defensive. I won't give them the story they're writing." Rachel leaned back. "Then what's your plan?" Evelyn didn't answer. Instead, she picked up her phone, opened a private messaging app, and typed 3 words. "Activate 6-1 protocol." The recipient was labeled only as AA. No name. Just initials. Rachel noticed. "You sure?" "Yes." "Do I get to ask what that is?" "No." Rachel smiled slightly. "Then I'll trust it's something better than a press release." "It's bigger." At that moment, the door opened again. Agent Halbrook returned, folder in hand, expression unreadable. "Ms. Ford," he said, taking a seat across from her. "We've completed the preliminary review of your records. And? There are Inconsistencies, but nothing conclusive. For now, we're classifying this as an open review, not a formal investigation. Evelyn tilted her head. So I'm free to go? You are, but I suggest not boarding another plane until we close the file. I'll take it under advisement. He pushed the folder toward her. You may want to see what's circulating online. Inside was a printed screenshot. A fake headline splashed across multiple news aggregators. Nova learned CEO under fraud scrutiny. Investor trust in question. And there, just below it, a doctored image. Evelyn, seemingly in tears, walking out of a courtroom. Photoshop, but convincing. Who's leaking these? Rachel asked. Hal Brooke shook his head. We don't know. The image came from a South African data server that routes through Belarus. A shell, Evelyn murmured. Rachel stood. We're done here. Hal Brooke nodded and left. Once the door closed, Evelyn whispered, They're coming faster than I expected. Rachel's expression turned steel. Then we move faster. But Evelyn paused. Her hand hovered over the file. This isn't just about me, she said. It's about erasing what I represent. Rachel didn't disagree. They walked out of the building into a blinding afternoon sun. Evelyn adjusted her sunglasses, shoulders squared. She had survived worse, but this time, they were attacking her legacy, and she would make them pay for that. The black sedan sliced through the Washington traffic like a blade through silk. Inside, Evelyn Ford sat in the back seat, her silence as sharp as the lines of her suit. Rachel Park sat beside her, tapping furiously on a tablet as news updates poured in. Evelyn didn't need to read them. She already knew the tone. Doubt cloaked in polite language, concern masked as curiosity. 3 outlets picked it up in the last hour, Rachel said, not looking up. CNN, Axios, and TechVision, all quoting anonymous sources close to the investigation. She snorted. Translation, planted. Evelyn nodded but said nothing. They're painting you as evasive, saying your silence is guilt. One headline reads, Evelyn Ford's Disappearing Act. Let them. Rachel turned, brows arched. You sure about that? Yes, because silence is a vacuum, and they're filling it with poison. I've been underestimated my whole life, Rachel, but they've never watched what happens when I'm underestimated on purpose. Rachel looked at her for a long beat. Then we play this your way. They pulled into the underground garage of a sleek, mirrored building. No sign on the door, no logos, just layers of steel, security, and silence. Inside, a single man waited in the glass-walled lobby. Mid-40s, military haircut, gray suit, tablet in hand. When Evelyn stepped out of the elevator, he didn't smile. Ms. Ford, he said. We're ready. He led them into a secure conference room where a massive screen blinked with encrypted feeds. Rachel's eyes flicked to a familiar logo in the bottom right corner. Is this DARPA? The man gave a non-answer answer. Some of our analysts consult across agencies. Evelyn took a seat, hands folded. Play it, she said. The man nodded. The screen shifted. A video appeared. High resolution, eerie in clarity. It was Evelyn's face, sitting in a courtroom, nervously glancing around as lawyers spoke. The subtitle read, Evelyn Ford pleads no contest in securities fraud settlement. Rachel's mouth tightened. That never happened, she said. It's deepfake. The analyst tapped. The image froze. We ran forensic tests. 98% accuracy, AI generated using over 3,000 reference frames from public appearances. It's one of the most sophisticated simulations we've seen. Rachel leaned back. They're trying to convict her in the court of public perception before any real case sticks. The analyst nodded. And they've got backing. The server the video originated from is funded through a Hong Kong shell corp, owned in part by a holding company with ties to Next Path. Evelyn's eyes narrowed. So Richard isn't just rogue. He has corporate backing. We believe so, and possibly government friends. 2 of the IP hops go through defense contractor infrastructure. Rachel whistled. This isn't a smear campaign, it's an orchestrated takedown. The analyst tapped again. The screen shifted to an internal Nova Learn personnel chart. One face was highlighted in red. Caleb Monroe, Chief Financial Officer. Rachel cursed under her breath. I told you. What did he access? The analyst read from his screen. Encrypted founder contracts, equity certificates, bank auth chains. Enough to plant digital evidence if he copied or restructured documents. He was part of our Series A, Evelyn murmured. He helped draft the original terms. Rachel nodded grimly, which means he knows what to forge and what looks real. The analyst added, we also traced 3 financial transfers from Monroe's Cayman account, $70,000 each, labeled as consulting fees. To who? We're still tracking, but one recipient is a known NextPath contractor. Rachel stood. We need a federal injunction. Now. We're working on it, the analyst said. But it'll take hours, maybe days. Evelyn finally spoke. Then we use minutes. Rachel turned. What do you mean? I'm going public. Rachel froze. Are you sure? That's what they want, to draw you into a messy PR war. No, Evelyn said. They want me to react. Instead, I'll expose. She stood, her voice steady. Call Diane Keller at 60 Minutes. Tell her I'll do a sit-down. Full access. Rachel stared. That's a gamble. So is silence. Evelyn turned to the analyst. In the meantime, get me Elaine Foster, the ex-NextPath VP. She has receipts. She just needs a reason to release them. Rachel pulled out her phone, already dialing. As she did, Evelyn walked to the window, looking out over the Capitol dome. They want a spectacle, she said. Let's give them one. 20 minutes later, Evelyn sat in a different room, smaller, quieter. A private Zoom call loaded on a secured laptop. The screen flashed to life. A woman appeared. Elaine Foster, mid-50s, hair pulled tight, blazer neat, eyes tired. Ms. Ford, she said cautiously, I didn't expect to hear from you. You owe me a conversation. Elaine nodded once. I suppose I do. You sat in those rooms. You saw what they planned. I did. You know they're trying to bury me. I do. Then help me dig back. Elaine hesitated. I have a daughter, she said, and she's watching all this, watching me. I taught her to stand up. I just never thought I'd have to do it like this. She looked directly into the camera. I'll send you everything I have. Evelyn's face softened, just for a moment. Thank you. As the call ended, Rachel re-entered the room. Diane Keller confirmed. We tape tomorrow. Evelyn exhaled. Then let's make sure the world is still watching. Elaine Foster didn't sleep the night before the documents dropped. She sat at her kitchen table long after her daughter went to bed, an untouched mug of tea cooling beside her laptop. On the screen, a secure drive open with hundreds of files, meeting transcripts, confidential memos, internal recordings. Most had sat in digital silence for years. Forgotten. But now, every document felt like a weapon waiting to be drawn. Elaine had once been the golden architect of NextPath's public face, Vice President of Innovation, tasked with presenting their AI platform as inclusive, ethical, groundbreaking. She had given speeches at Davos and headlined panels on equity in tech. And she'd believed it, until she saw how easily they twisted those words when Evelyn Ford entered the picture. She remembered that day vividly. Evelyn had presented NovaLearn's early AI model to the board. It was lean, decentralized, culturally adaptive. The tech worked. The data proved it. But the room of white men in tailored suits didn't want a disruptor they couldn't control. When Evelyn left the room, Richard Harlan leaned over and said, "Impressive, for someone without a real tech pedigree." The others laughed. Elaine hadn't, but she hadn't spoken up either. Until now. She selected 6 key files, encrypted them, and attached them to an email labeled simply, "NovaLearn Defense, Urgent." She hit send. The next morning, Evelyn received the message while seated in a private green room at CBS Studios. Hair perfectly styled, suit navy with gold trim. She stared at the email, then looked at Rachel. "She did it," Evelyn said. "She really did it." Rachel scanned the contents. Her eyebrows rose. "This is enough to bury half of NextPath's board." One file caught her eye, an internal meeting transcript between Richard and the CEO of NextPath. "We undervalue her platform, tank her valuation, then sweep in with a buyout. PR will clean up the optics." "Do we have evidence this meeting happened?" Rachel asked. Evelyn scrolled to the next attachment, a time-stamped audio recording. Richard's voice was unmistakable. Rachel exhaled sharply. "This changes everything." An hour later, Evelyn sat across from Diane Keller under studio lights. The cameras rolled. The nation tuned in. Diane opened with a gentle question. "Ms. Ford, let's start with the obvious. Why have you been silent until now?" Evelyn smiled, but her eyes remained cold. "Because silence is often mistaken for weakness. I needed them to show their full hand first." "And what do you believe that hand holds?" "Manufactured evidence, coordinated defamation, a systemic attempt to dismantle what I've built. Not because it's flawed, but because it worked without their permission." Diane blinked. "That's a strong accusation." "I have the receipts." Evelyn pulled a folder from her side. She laid out redacted transcripts and emails. Then she slid over a flash drive. Diane leaned forward, voice lowered. "What's on this drive?" "Proof that NextPath executives held meetings to intentionally devalue Nova Learn, plant insiders, and fabricate legal threats to coerce a forced acquisition." The studio went silent. Evelyn added, "And I have audio. Direct quotes, including Richard Harlan referring to me as a PR win if I agreed to sell, and a problematic liability if I refused." Outside the building, Twitter ignited. "Stand with Evelyn. At Nova Learn Gate. At corporate sabotage." Back in her office, Elaine watched the interview unfold on her screen. Her daughter entered the room, pausing as Evelyn's voice filled the space. "You sent that?" the girl asked. Elaine nodded. Her daughter walked over and hugged her without a word. Sometimes justice didn't roar. It whispered, then echoed. At NextPath headquarters, chaos erupted. PR teams scrambled. Investors called for emergency board meetings. Journalists swarmed their building. And in the middle of it all, Richard Harlan stormed through the corridors, face pale, eyes wide. "She has the audio," someone whispered. "She went public," another added. Richard slammed his office door. Inside, he pulled out a burner phone and dialed. "It's active," he barked. "We need phase 2. The voice on the other end was cold. "That was only supposed to be a threat." "Well, now it's real." "You understand what phase 2 means?" Richard hesitated. "Just do it." He hung up. Back at CBS, as Evelyn left the studio, Rachel intercepted her. "We have a problem," she said. "What now?" "The SEC just issued a request to freeze Nova Learn's assets." Evelyn stopped. "On what grounds?" "Claim of insider manipulation, citing an anonymous informant from within your company." Evelyn narrowed her eyes. "Monroe?" Rachel nodded. "Almost certainly. But he's gone silent. I tried pinging him. No response. No movement on his usual devices." Evelyn exhaled. "He's running," Rachel added. "Or he's being protected." Evelyn turned to the waiting car. "Then we go to the source." Rachel blinked. "You mean?" Evelyn nodded. "The Department of Education. If Nova Learn was sabotaged as a public education tool, then it's not just corporate, it's national." Rachel sighed. "You're about to make this nuclear." Evelyn opened the car door. "Then let's watch it burn." When Evelyn Ford walked into the Department of Education, it was not as a CEO seeking an audience. She walked in as a disruptor bringing evidence of systemic sabotage. The marble hallways echoed with her heels, and Rachel Park flanked her like a sword drawn from its sheath. Waiting inside a private conference room were 5 senior officials, including the Undersecretary for Digital Innovation, and 2 legal advisors from the Federal Trade Commission. They'd seen the interview. They'd seen the flash drive. And now they were all waiting for what Evelyn would say next. "I'm not here to defend myself," she began. "I'm here to expose a pattern, one that didn't begin with me and won't end unless you act." She slid a new folder onto the table, one she hadn't shown in the interview. Inside were side-by-side comparisons. NextPath's AI modules for virtual classrooms and NovaLearn's architecture. The similarities were damning. More than that, they were blatant. Rachel added, "Their IP infringement is one thing, but what matters more is intent. They didn't just steal tech. They tried to silence the system that worked because it didn't benefit them." One advisor leaned forward. "And you're suggesting this reaches into public policy?" "I'm saying it already has," Evelyn said. "NovaLearn was in final talks for federal deployment. Then suddenly, our approval stalled. Emails went unanswered. NextPath lobbied for a competing contract weeks later, and they got it. Their version isn't just flawed. It's dangerous." The undersecretary frowned. "We've had reports of errors in student profiling with their beta rollout." Evelyn nodded. "Because their model isn't built to understand cultural nuance. Ours was. That's why they shut us down." Rachel handed over a legal brief. "We're filing for injunction and full investigation. But we also need the government to halt NextPath's education contracts until this is resolved." The room went still. "We'll review this," the undersecretary finally said. "But understand, this is going to get political." Evelyn didn't flinch. "Then let's politicize justice." News of Evelyn's visit leaked within hours. Journalists swarmed the department. Hashtags reignited. Evelyn vs. Empire, to EdTech. War had NextPath exposed, but what hit harder than hashtags were the headlines that followed. Ford delivers evidence of tech sabotage to federal authorities. Department of Education reviewing NextPath contracts after NovaLearn allegations. Whistleblower confirms audio of Harlan plotting Ford takedown. Evelyn's team received over 2,000 media requests in 48 hours. Former staffers from NovaLearn sent in messages of support. Even school districts that had trialed NovaLearn's platform began issuing public statements, citing its transformative impact. But the biggest blow came unexpectedly, from abroad. The Guardian published an investigative piece sourced from anonymous British cybersecurity officials. They confirmed that the deepfake video targeting Evelyn had been flagged months earlier as synthetically suspicious and linked to a known troll farm affiliated with corporate espionage. The article included chilling detail. Multiple attacks against female entrepreneurs of color traced to same entity, funded via offshore accounts. Primary targets included Evelyn Ford. It was no longer just a scandal, it was a conspiracy. In a penthouse office above Manhattan, Richard Harlan stared at the screen. Sweat beaded at his temple. Around him, legal advisors shouted across a cluttered war room of screens, phones, and empty coffee cups. "Evelyn's getting invited to testify in front of Congress," one assistant shouted. Another added, 3 board members just resigned. They don't want to be caught in this fallout." Richard slammed a fist on the desk. "Where's Monroe? He promised full silence." "No trace," someone else said. "He wiped everything and disappeared." Richard looked toward the wall, where a digital map showed a pulsing red dot, an alert tied to any federal warrant issued against NextPath properties. It had started flashing 5 minutes ago. "Find me a narrative reset," Richard said. Now. But his PR team had none. The story was no longer his to shape. Back at Evelyn's townhouse, she sat with Rachel and a small team of strategists. The next steps were clear. Testify, protect the company, and push for systemic reforms. But Evelyn wasn't thinking about the company. She was thinking about the girl in Chicago who messaged her that morning. "NovaLearn helped me pass my college entrance exam. They said I wasn't smart enough. Your AI proved them wrong." That message was why she'd built it in the first place. For students overlooked, for classrooms underfunded, for systems designed to exclude. Rachel interrupted her thoughts. "They're offering full immunity if you cooperate on the investigation. You'd be a key witness, not a target." "I'm not a witness," Evelyn said quietly. I'm a builder. I'm not here to clean up the fire. They're going to see what I build from the ashes." Rachel nodded. Then, unexpectedly, Evelyn smiled. "Get me a whiteboard," she said. "We're redesigning Nova Learn from scratch. New protocol, post-scandal, post-patents, open source." Rachel blinked. "Open source? Let them steal it. I'll make it free, make it viral. They can't sabotage what belongs to everyone." And just like that, Evelyn Ford went from survivor to revolution. Rachel Park didn't sleep the night she cracked the source. At 3:12 a.m., she stared at her screen. Coffee cold, hair tied in a loose knot, the glow of dozens of browser tabs lighting her face. She'd been tracing digital signatures from the deepfake video that nearly derailed Evelyn's life. While most trails led to dead ends or decoy IPs, one signature repeated across multiple layers of metadata. It didn't belong to NextPath. It belonged to Signal Room Media, a boutique media firm out of Estonia, registered as a creative agency, but known in cybersecurity circles as a digital mirage company. They specialized in narrative control, counter-propaganda, and reputation re-engineering. And they didn't work cheap. Rachel dug deeper. One offshore account had funneled $4.7 million into Signal Room's accounts in the last 6 months. The money came from a shell fund, Pioneer Cross Holdings, registered in the British Virgin Islands. But she found something more damning. Pioneer Cross Holdings shared an address and banking intermediary with NextPath's Cayman subsidiary. She slammed her laptop closed and called Evelyn. "We have them," Rachel said. "The video, the smear campaign, it's all traceable, and it's funded directly by NextPath." By noon, the FBI was involved. At a federal building in D.C., 2 special agents briefed Evelyn and Rachel in a private room. Maps, payment diagrams, corporate hierarchies, all projected on a wall-sized screen. "The case has moved from civil to criminal," Agent Downey said. "We're freezing NextPath's U.S. accounts pending the investigation." Rachel raised an eyebrow. "Just their U.S. ones? We're coordinating internationally, but NextPath's financial web is sophisticated, and we've hit a complication." That's when the second agent stepped in, clearing his throat. "We've discovered that NextPath's CEO, Andrew Voss, has had undisclosed financial ties with a member of the Senate Intelligence Committee." Rachel blinked. "You're kidding." "I'm not." Evelyn sat still, jaw tight. "Who?" The agent hesitated. "Senator Clay Hanford." The room froze. Hanford was no ordinary senator. He sat on tech regulation subcommittees, had been an early investor in several AI initiatives, and was known for pushing aggressive data privacy laws. Ironically, laws that Evelyn herself once supported. Rachel stood. "That's a conflict of interest. It could compromise the entire investigation." Agent Downey nodded. "That's our concern. We've already had pushback from higher up, subtle calls asking us to narrow the focus." Evelyn scoffed. "Meaning stay away from the politics?" "Exactly." Evelyn turned toward the projection. "So, let me guess. Voss used his relationship with Hanford to shield the smear campaign, stall federal contracts, and maybe even orchestrate the legal freeze on Nova Learn assets." Rachel added. "And in return, Hanford likely got favorable coverage from Signal Room, or worse, inside tech influence." Downey didn't confirm, but his silence spoke volumes. "We're going to keep pushing," he said. "But you should know, it's about to get dirtier." That afternoon, Evelyn convened a private strategy session at a secured townhouse in DuPont Circle. Inside were trusted allies: Rachel, legal experts, 2 cybersecurity analysts, and 3 journalists who had broken major corruption stories in the past decade. "We go to war," Evelyn said, "not just against NextPath, but against the machine protecting it." One of the analysts spoke up. "We've traced at least 12 payments from Pioneer Cross to think tanks aligned with Senator Hanford's agenda. They've been shaping the narrative for months, publishing independent reports questioning Nova Learn's AI ethics." Another journalist added, "And Signal Room has run anti-Ford bot campaigns across Reddit, YouTube, and Twitter. We have screen grabs and timestamps. It's coordinated. Rachel turned to Evelyn. We release all of it, now. But Evelyn paused. No, she said. Not all at once. Everyone looked confused. Evelyn stood, walking toward the window. We leak the corruption first. Hanford, the payments, the shell companies. Let the political world explode. Then, once the machine's weakened, we drop the signal room files. If we do it right, they'll fight each other before they can fight back. Rachel nodded slowly. Divide and expose. Exactly. Evelyn looked out the window, voice cool. If they're going to use deepfake to erase me, I'll use real truth to erase them. 2 days later, headlines blazed across America. Senator Hanford linked to shadow funds tied to AI smear campaigns. NextPath CEO and Senate ally exposed in ethics leak. FBI freezes corporate accounts in ongoing tech sabotage probe. Cable news lit up. Talk shows debated. Political opponents seized the moment, calling for Hanford's resignation. Ethics committees launched inquiries. Suddenly, what began as an attack on Evelyn had morphed into a full-blown DC firestorm. And Evelyn? She watched from her office, calm, composed, calculating. Rachel sat beside her, scrolling through social media. You've got a meme now. Evelyn glanced. It was a photo of her during the 60 Minutes interview, captioned, "They buried her, but didn't know she was a seed." She smiled. Cute. Then she opened a folder labeled Stage 2, Rebuild, because the war wasn't over, but the tide had turned. The email came at 4:17 a.m., sent from a secure encrypted address to the FBI's cybercrime division. It contained no text, just an attachment labeled, "For Evelyn, Truth." Inside the small digital package was a video recording and a file directory titled Operation Eclipse. The sender's IP was masked, but the metadata, on purpose or mistake, left one clue. It had originated from NextPath's internal network, precisely the executive floor. The video opened with shaky hands and a face partially hidden by shadow. But the voice, young, steady, emotional, rang clear. My name is Jordan Ellis. I work as executive assistant to Richard Harlan. For the past 6 months, I've been compiling evidence on what he and his team have done to destroy Evelyn Ford. Today, I can't stay silent anymore. Not because of the law, but because of her. The video cut to a desktop screen. Hundreds of documents, audio files, strategy decks, and internal Slack messages. One file opened mid-scroll. Narrative Disruption Plan, Ford. It included bullet points. Discredit NovaLearn's algorithm as racially biased. Leak doctored images to fringe media. Feed confidential SEC tips via shell accounts. Prepare buyout option at 20% valuation. The camera cut back to Jordan. His voice trembled. None of this was just business. It was personal. Because she refused to sell. Because she stood up. Because she threatened the hierarchy. He paused. And I couldn't let that continue. At FBI headquarters, the file was authenticated. It was the digital Rosetta Stone of the entire takedown effort. And within hours, Evelyn Ford was briefed. But what shook her wasn't the file. It was the name. Jordan Ellis, she said aloud. Rachel, who sat beside her, blinked. You know him? Evelyn didn't speak immediately. She walked to the window of her office, staring at the city skyline. Then, almost in a whisper, he was one of mine. 15 years earlier, Evelyn had visited a group home in Baltimore, piloting an early NovaLearn prototype with high-risk youth. Most kids kept their heads down, eyes blank, trauma etched into every movement. But one boy, skinny, sharp-eyed, never smiled, stood out. He'd hacked the reading app within a week to include banned history books. Why'd you do it? She'd asked. He didn't answer right away. Then, because the truth isn't in what they teach, it's in what they hide. Evelyn had smiled. Then let's build a system that teaches truth. His name was Jordan. She had personally helped him get out of the system, sponsored his GED, found him housing, wrote his college recommendation. She hadn't heard from him since, until now. In the video's closing moments, Jordan turned the camera to himself fully. His face was pale, eyes hollow but resolute. I betrayed her trust by working for the people who tried to erase her, but I also saw what they did behind closed doors. I saw the smirks, the slurs, the plans, and I remembered why I got out of that group home. Because of her. He held up a USB stick. This contains everything. I know it's not enough to undo what's been done, but it's enough to stop them. He ended with one line. Tell her thank you. The moment the FBI released a redacted version of the video to the public, the internet exploded. Jordan Ellis trended within hours. Saved by Nova, Learn became a symbol. Talk show panels wept on air. Commentators dubbed it the twist of the year. One YouTuber titled his reaction, "Plot twist so pure it hurts. Evelyn Ford just got her angel." But Evelyn didn't watch the coverage. She sat in a private cafe, tears pooling silently as she watched the uncut version. Rachel arrived minutes later and sat beside her. "He didn't just leak files," Rachel said softly. "He handed us a confession and a motive. It's enough to indict at least 5 execs, including Harlan." Evelyn wiped her cheek and smiled faintly. "He was a quiet kid, but he always saw too much." Rachel leaned in. "You saved him once. Now he saved you." Evelyn didn't reply, but she looked out the window with a new light in her eyes. Hope, not for herself. For everyone who thought the system would always win. At Next Path, Richard Harlan's office door slammed shut. His legal team scrambled, shouting about the leak, the exposure, the federal response. But Richard wasn't listening. He stared at his screen, looping Jordan's face in the confession. "That little orphan," he growled. "She planted him." But no one replied, because they all knew it wasn't sabotage. It was gratitude, and it couldn't be undone. The Capitol building stood like a monument carved from history, but today, it was about the future. Evelyn Ford walked through its marble halls with her chin lifted, dressed in a charcoal suit and carrying nothing but a leather folio and decades of lived experience. News cameras lined the steps outside. Protesters and supporters both shouted her name. But inside, there was only quiet. The kind of quiet that comes before the shifting of power. She entered the hearing room to hushed murmurs. Members of Congress, tech analysts, education leaders, and press reporters had packed the gallery. C-SPAN was broadcasting live. The world was watching. This was not just a corporate hearing. This was history. The chairwoman of the committee, Representative Laura Chen, gavelled the session into order. "We're here to discuss allegations of corporate sabotage, AI manipulation, and public education interference linked to the NovaLearn case. We welcome Ms. Evelyn Ford." Evelyn took her seat at the front table. The mic blinked red. Her hands were steady. Representative Chen leaned in. "Ms. Ford, please begin your opening statement." Evelyn nodded. Then she spoke. "In 2012, I started NovaLearn not as a company, but as a promise to build educational technology that sees every child, hears every accent, and adapts to every zip code. What I didn't expect was how violently that promise would be resisted by those who benefit from exclusion." She paused, locking eyes with the audience. "What happened to me wasn't just about stolen algorithms or corporate sabotage. It was about fear. Fear that a black woman could build something that didn't ask permission." Murmurs rippled through the chamber. She continued, "They said I doctored numbers. They deepfaked my face. They paid for my silence with lobbyist money and character assassins. But they forgot one thing. Technology without ethics becomes a weapon. And those weapons were pointed at students, families, and a system already cracking." Representative Chen raised a brow. "And what do you believe must change?" Evelyn's voice sharpened. "We need accountability, not just in code, but in culture. We need AI audits written by ethicists, not shareholders. We need public education shielded from venture greed. And we need laws that understand tech can discriminate just as cruelly as any human." The room went still. Then, slowly, applause broke from the gallery. Outside the hearing, the financial world trembled. Within hours, 6 of NextPath's major institutional investors, Blackwell Equity, Stratford Partners, Atlas Capital, and 3 others, issued statements suspending all funding pending internal review. Their stocks dropped 11% by the end of the day. Headlines poured in. Wall Street turns on NextPath after Evelyn Ford's testimony. Nova Learn vindicated. Investors abandon sinking tech giant. Public trust shifts as Ford becomes voice of ethical AI. Rachel Park stood in Evelyn's townhouse later that night, scrolling through the chaos. "You just triggered a tectonic shift," she said, handing Evelyn a glass of wine. Evelyn smiled softly. "Let it ripple," Rachel added. "You've got a request from the Department of Education." Evelyn turned. "They want to appoint you as a special advisor, National Educational Technology Strategy Board, cabinet-level collaboration, full autonomy." Evelyn froze. After all the destruction, all the lies, all the war, they were handing her the blueprint to rebuild the future. She walked to the window, breath fogging the glass. "They buried me," she whispered. "And now they're asking me to grow the forest." Rachel grinned. "You going to say yes?" "I didn't fight this hard to say no." The next morning, Evelyn stood on the steps of the Capitol for a press briefing. She wore the same navy suit from her 60 Minutes interview, symbolic armor forged by fire. She looked directly into the cameras. "I accept the invitation to serve as special advisor for educational technology reform. But I will serve not as a symbol, but as an architect. We will redesign systems that were never built for equity, and we will make truth, not profit, the foundation of our classrooms." A cheer erupted from the crowd. Reporters fired questions. Students in Nova Learn t-shirts waved signs of support. And somewhere in a quiet apartment in Baltimore, a young woman streamed the press conference. She was once a struggling 9th grader. Now she was enrolled in MIT, thanks to an adaptive learning model that saw her worth. She turned to her roommate and smiled. She changed everything. The knock at Evelyn Ford's office door was soft, too soft for the usual chaos of Capitol Hill. Rachel looked up from her laptop, frowning. "Are we expecting anyone?" Evelyn didn't answer. She already knew. She closed her leather folio and stood, smoothing the front of her blazer. "Let him in," she said. Rachel opened the door, and there he was. Richard Harlan, thinner, grayer, the trademark arrogance stripped from his face, replaced by something else. Fatigue, perhaps. Or something closer to resignation. He stepped into the room without his usual sharp stride. This wasn't the man who had tried to orchestrate her public destruction. This was the man after the avalanche, after the storm had buried his empire. "Miss Ford," he began. Evelyn raised a hand. "You can drop the formalities, Richard. We're far past that." He nodded slowly and took a seat across from her, shoulders slightly hunched. "I came to say I was wrong." Silence filled the room like fog. He continued. "I believed in the game. I thought if I played it well, if I controlled the narrative, the tech, the funding, I could reshape the market. I told myself you were in the way. But I realize now I was never building anything, just protecting a throne made of sand." Evelyn leaned back, her face unreadable. "You weaponized lies," she said softly. "You risked the education of children for power." Richard didn't argue. "I did. And now, I'm paying for it. The DOJ has enough evidence to prosecute me under corporate conspiracy and obstruction. I'll be indicted next week." Rachel, listening silently from the corner, gave a curt nod. "Good." Richard turned to Evelyn. "I'm not here to ask for forgiveness. I don't deserve it." Evelyn's eyes locked onto his. "Then why are you here?" Richard exhaled. "Because I want to testify, fully. I've kept records, more than they know. I can expose the entire network, the funders, the shell companies, the coordinated takedowns of other startups. Nova Learn wasn't the first." Rachel stepped forward. "Why now? You could have burned this entire system down months ago." "I was afraid," Richard said, voice raw. "But watching you testify, watching Jordan risk everything. I realized I've spent my whole life in shadows, pulling strings. Now it's my turn to stand under the light. Evelyn was quiet for a long time. When she finally spoke, her voice was calm, almost gentle. I won't tell the public you've changed, Richard, because accountability isn't a headline. It's a process. He swallowed. But I'll support your testimony, if it's complete. If it names every collaborator, every puppet master, every silence paid for with a wire transfer. He nodded. It will. She stood. He did too. She looked him in the eyes, not with malice, but with clarity. I won't forgive you, but I won't hate you either. I've seen what hate becomes. He blinked. Then what do you see? Evelyn smiled faintly. A lesson, one you've earned. She walked him to the door. As he stepped out, she added, Consequences, Richard, are how people learn ethics when nothing else works. 2 days later, Richard stood in a private hearing room under federal protection. The prosecutor's office had agreed. Full immunity in exchange for full disclosure. He opened a black briefcase and pulled out a single flash drive. This contains everything, he said. From the offshore accounts that funded Signal Room to the voting records of senators pressured to block NovaLearn's contracts. Even bribes disguised as nonprofit donations. He clicked through the files. One showed a list of 16 names, CEOs, lobbyists, 2 defense contractors, and 1 senior intelligence consultant, all connected through money trails leading back 10 years. One name stunned even the prosecutors, a former Secretary of Education. I was part of the machine, Richard said, voice flat. I didn't create it, but I oiled its gears. Now I'm breaking it. The fallout was nuclear. Within 72 hours, 3 major tech CEOs resigned. 5 senators were placed under ethics review. The FTC launched an independent task force on anti-innovation corporate conspiracies. And Congress announced the creation of a Tech Truth Commission, with Evelyn Ford named as Chair Emeritus. In a joint press statement, the Department of Justice called Richard's testimony one of the most comprehensive confessions of white-collar sabotage in modern history. And while Evelyn never issued a public comment on Richard again, one line from her speech at the launch of the commission seemed to echo just loud enough. Sometimes, it takes a villain to expose a system. And sometimes, even villains remember they were children once, taught by someone who believed they could be better. Richard Harlan was never seen on another corporate board. He moved to a small coastal town, taught at a community college under a different name, and every year he sent a donation to the NovaLearn Foundation. Anonymous. But Evelyn knew. The auditorium was dark, except for the soft, celestial glow of the screen surrounding the stage. Hundreds of cameras blinked from the back wall, connecting over 3,000 students from 38 countries. Each one dialed in for a moment that had already become legend. Evelyn Ford stood backstage, a hand resting on the podium she'd soon step behind. She could hear the translator feeds humming, the murmur of kids in Nairobi and Seoul, in Bogota and Detroit, preparing to watch history unfold. Rachel Park stood beside her, dressed simply, but beaming with quiet pride. "You ready?" she asked. Evelyn didn't answer immediately. She was remembering something buried but never forgotten. A girl, age 13, alone in a crowded school hallway, holding a textbook full of equations she understood but wasn't allowed to answer aloud because she talked too fast, raised her hand too much, made others uncomfortable. She remembered the sting of invisibility, and now that girl was about to speak to the world. She stepped out. The lights rose. The applause was instant, roaring. Some cried. Some chanted her name. Some just stared, eyes wide with awe and disbelief. She waited for silence, then began. When I started NovaLearn, I wasn't looking to build an empire. I was building a bridge for kids who were told their accents were wrong, their skin too dark, their ideas too loud. Her voice carried, crisp and resonant. I didn't ask permission, and I was punished for that. Punished by institutions that thrive on silence, that sabotage what they can't control. Camera feeds cut to dozens of classrooms filled with students, some sitting on dirt floors, others in sleek lecture halls, all listening. But here's what they didn't understand, Evelyn continued. I didn't come from a place of obedience. I came from hunger, for knowledge, for justice, for change. She paused. They buried me under lawsuits, lies, and synthetic shame. But every time they tried to erase me, someone showed up to remind me who I was. A student, a teacher, a coder, a truth teller. The applause began again, softer this time, more reverent. And now, Evelyn said, lifting her head, we begin again, but not just with apps and code, with reform, with reach. She turned slightly, and behind her, a massive digital map lit up, highlighting 38 countries now partnering with Nova Learn. Real partnerships, real schools, real students. From Ghana to Indonesia, Nova Learn had gone global. This platform isn't mine anymore, Evelyn said. It belongs to every child who sat at the back of the class, every student told to lower their hand, every mind mistaken for a threat. Her eyes scanned the crowd, then looked directly into the camera. People ask me, did I win? She smiled. No, I changed the game. The room fell still, and then she delivered the final line, already destined to echo through social feeds, history books, and policy papers alike. I don't need anyone to pave the way for me. I am the one who builds the road. The clip went viral within minutes. By the end of the day, it had been translated into 49 languages, featured on every major global outlet, and dissected in college lecture halls across 5 continents. The Nova Learn global expansion became a case study in how grassroots technology, forged by resistance, could upend elite monopolies. Governments reached out with invitations to integrate Evelyn's ethical AI frameworks into national curricula. UNESCO nominated Nova Learn for the Global Education Impact Award. Evelyn herself was offered honorary degrees from Harvard, Oxford, and the University of Cape Town, all in 1 week. But none of that moved her as much as a simple letter she received 2 days later, written in pencil from a child in rural India. Dear Evelyn Ford, I watched your talk. Our school has 1 tablet for 27 of us, but now I know I am not too small to matter. When I grow up, I will build a school like you. Love, Ishan. She kept that letter in her office, pinned beside a photo of Jordan Ellis, the assistant who once betrayed her, then saved her. It reminded her that legacy wasn't in the headlines. It was in the hands that reached back. In the months that followed, Evelyn took on her role as special advisor with quiet resolve. She rewrote federal edtech policy drafts to mandate diversity audits in all learning algorithms. She helped fund local makerspaces in underserved areas. And she led a new coalition of educators, programmers, and policy advocates known as Future Truth, a nonprofit aimed at rebuilding trust in public knowledge. She didn't sit in corner offices anymore. She traveled, she taught, she mentored. And in one iconic moment, during a panel at the United Nations, she stood beside a young girl from Brazil who had learned English through Nova Learn and was now teaching coding to her entire village. This, Evelyn said, holding the girl's hand, is the revolution. Rachel Park watched it all unfold from the periphery. She declined interviews, turned down book deals. But one night, sitting across from Evelyn on a quiet balcony, she finally asked, "Do you ever think about what might have happened if you had just sold Nova Learn and walked away?" Evelyn looked at her. "I would have had peace," she said, "but not purpose." Rachel nodded. Evelyn added, "And now I get to give both to others." The story of Evelyn Ford didn't end with applause or titles. It continued in the echoes of classrooms across continents, in voices that no longer apologized for speaking, in systems re-engineered for equity, and in the quiet roar of a single sentence, scrawled in chalk, etched in stone, or whispered in hope. She didn't follow the road, she built it.